If you have been trying to lose belly fat and nothing seems to work, the problem may not be calories, hormones, or willpower. Many people eat less, move more, and still stay stuck, with low energy and a soft belly that refuses to change. Over time, they blame themselves. But fat loss is not a moral issue, it is a resource problem. When the body has energy, it spends energy. When it does not, it stores fat. Belly fat is not there because your body hates you, but because it does not feel energetically safe. In biology, safety means reliable energy. When energy feels scarce, fat stays. When energy flows, fat becomes optional. Most diets fail because they focus on restriction instead of energy. The real question is why the body feels so low on energy to begin with. The answer starts with the liver. The liver is the metabolic control center, deciding what to burn and what to store. But it also carries an overlooked task, producing creatine every day. Not for muscles or appearance, but for survival. Creatine is a core energy currency used by the brain, muscles, and nervous system. When creatine is low, energy production slows and fatigue appears early. Producing creatine is biologically expensive, requiring resources the liver also needs for burning fat and controlling inflammation. When resources are limited, survival is prioritized and fat loss is delayed. This is not a flaw, it is intelligent design. The problem is that modern diets provide very little creatine, forcing the liver to work harder and making the system feel slow and resistant. Creatine was labeled a gym supplement, but biology does not care about gym culture. Creatine does not ask if you lift weights, it simply manages energy. Ignoring it does not make you healthier, it only makes your liver work harder. The key reframe is simple. Creatine is not a muscle supplement, but an energy management tool. When creatine is supplied from the outside, the liver frees up resources and fat loss becomes biologically possible again. In the next part, we will go deeper into the liver and the metabolic bottleneck that keeps belly fat stuck. The liver is not just an organ that processes food. It is the central energy manager of the body. Every decision about burning fat, storing fat, detoxifying hormones, and controlling inflammation passes through it. When the liver has sufficient resources, metabolism feels smooth and flexible. When it does not, the system tightens, fat burning slows, inflammation rises, energy output drops. One of the most overlooked reasons this happens is a process called methylation. Methylation is a biochemical system that allows the liver to regulate hormones, neutralize toxins, repair cells, and manage inflammation. These tasks require small molecular units called methyl groups. The supply of methyl groups is limited, and the liver must constantly decide how to spend them. Here is the critical bottleneck. Creatine synthesis is one of the most methyl-intensive processes in human metabolism. When dietary creatine is low, the liver is forced to produce more of it internally, consuming a large share of its methyl resources in the process. This creates a metabolic traffic jam. Methyl groups are diverted away from fat oxidation and inflammation control and redirected toward basic energy maintenance. The liver shifts into survival mode. It becomes conservative, protective, and resistant to fat loss. This is why many people experience stubborn belly fat alongside signs of low metabolic resilience, such as poor recovery, hormone imbalance, and chronic inflammation. The body is not malfunctioning, it is reallocating scarce resources. When exogenous creatine is introduced, this bottleneck begins to clear. The liver senses that creatine demand is being met and downregulates its own production. Methyl groups are freed and redirected back to their primary roles. Fat metabolism improves, inflammatory signaling decreases, detoxification becomes more efficient. The metabolic system regains flexibility. This is why creatine acts less like a fat burner and more like a metabolic release valve. It removes an internal constraint that was silently blocking progress. Fat loss does not accelerate because the body is being forced. It accelerates because the liver finally has the resources to do its job properly. This methylation bottleneck is rarely discussed, but it explains why calorie control alone often fails and why supporting liver energy changes everything.
Here is where fat loss shifts from theory to daily behavior.
Energy is not just something you feel, it is something your cells must constantly produce. Every movement, every thought, every metabolic reaction runs on a molecule called ATP. ATP is the usable energy of life, and it is constantly being spent and regenerated. When ATP production is efficient, the body feels capable and active. When it is not, the body slows down to conserve fuel. This is why many people with stubborn belly fat are not inactive by choice. Their cells are operating in a low-energy state. Creatine plays a critical role here because it functions as a rapid energy buffer. When ATP is used, it loses a phosphate and becomes inactive. Creatine donates a phosphate to quickly regenerate ATP, keeping cellular energy available. When creatine levels are low, this recycling process is inefficient. Cells experience frequent energy drops, and the body compensates by reducing output. Movement becomes slower, posture collapses, small actions are avoided without conscious thought. This directly impacts NEAT, or non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which includes walking, standing, fidgeting, and spontaneous movement. NEAT is one of the largest drivers of daily energy expenditure, yet it disappears quietly when cellular energy is low. The body does not announce this shutdown, it simply chooses the elevator over the stairs and the chair over standing. When cells are saturated with creatine, ATP recycling becomes faster and more reliable. Energy feels available again. The body moves more without effort or motivation. Steps increase, movements become sharper, recovery improves. This is not stimulation like caffeine. There is no forced alertness or crash. It is a restoration of baseline capacity. Over time, this increase in natural movement creates a consistent energy deficit without conscious restriction. Visceral fat responds because the body no longer needs to conserve fuel. This is why creatine supports fat loss indirectly but powerfully. It does not burn fat itself. It raises the body's ability to express energy through movement. When energy is available at the cellular level, activity increases automatically, and fat loss follows as a consequence, not a command.
Here is the layer most people never connect to fat loss: the brain. The brain is the most energy-demanding organ in the body, consuming a disproportionate share of total fuel. Every decision, impulse, and act of self-control requires ATP. When brain energy is stable, behavior feels intentional. When it is low, discipline collapses. This is why cravings do not appear randomly. They tend to show up late in the day when mental energy has been depleted. What people call a lack of willpower is often a state of neurological energy deficit. Willpower is not a personality trait, it is a biological function. The prefrontal cortex, which governs planning, impulse control, and long-term decision-making, is especially sensitive to energy availability. When ATP levels drop, this region downregulates and the brain shifts towards short-term reward seeking. Sugar, refined carbohydrates, and highly palatable foods become difficult to resist, not because of weakness, but because the brain is attempting to restore energy quickly. Creatine plays a critical role in this process. It supports ATP recycling in brain cells just as it does in muscle. When brain creatine levels are adequate, cognitive fatigue is delayed, reaction time improves, and mental endurance increases. This has been observed most clearly under conditions of sleep deprivation and prolonged mental effort, where creatine supplementation preserves cognitive performance. By stabilizing brain energy, creatine helps maintain prefrontal function deeper into the day. This changes eating behavior in a subtle but powerful way. Decisions feel easier, cravings lose urgency. Adherence improves without relying on constant self-control. Fat loss protocols fail not because people lack discipline, but because they demand discipline from a depleted brain. Supporting brain energy changes the equation. Instead of fighting impulses, the brain remains capable of making consistent choices. Over time, this reduces dietary chaos, emotional eating, and reactive behavior. Fat loss becomes sustainable not because rules are stricter, but because the mind remains energized enough to follow them.
The confusion that stops many people from using creatine is the scale goes up. This leads to the immediate assumption that fat gain has occurred, but this interpretation is incorrect. Creatine does not cause fat gain. It changes where water is stored in the body. Creatine is an osmolyte, meaning it pulls water into the muscle cell. This is intracellular hydration, and it is a sign of improved cellular function. A hydrated muscle cell is metabolically active, insulin-sensitive, and resistant to breakdown. This is very different from subcutaneous water retention, which accumulates under the skin due to inflammation, excess sodium, or hormonal stress, and creates a soft, puffy appearance. Creatine shifts water into the muscle, not under the skin. This often makes muscles appear firmer and leaner, even while scale weight temporarily increases. This distinction matters because muscle tissue is expensive to maintain. When calories are reduced, the body often breaks down muscle to conserve energy, lowering metabolic rate in the process. Creatine helps prevent this by signaling abundance at the cellular level. Hydrated muscle cells activate pathways associated with preservation rather than breakdown. This protects lean mass during fat loss and helps maintain basal metabolic rate. Without this protection, many diets result in weight loss that includes muscle, leading to a slower metabolism and rapid rebound fat gain. Creatine changes this outcome. It does not make dieting easier by burning fat directly. It makes it safer by reducing muscle loss and metabolic slowdown. The initial increase in scale weight is not a setback. It is a sign that energy and water are being placed where they belong. Over time, as fat loss continues and inflammation decreases, body composition improves, even if the scale does not immediately reflect it. Understanding this distinction prevents unnecessary fear and allows the fat loss process to continue uninterrupted.
Here is how this should be implemented in the real world. The goal is not to flood the system, but to support it consistently. Old recommendations promoted loading phases with extremely high doses, but this approach is unnecessary and often counterproductive. The body cannot efficiently use large amounts of creatine at once, and excess intake increases the likelihood of digestive discomfort and water retention that is misinterpreted as fat gain. A steady daily dose is more effective. 5 grams per day is sufficient for most people to saturate tissues over time without stress to the system. This slow saturation respects physiology rather than forcing it. The form also matters. Despite marketing claims, most alternative versions offer no advantage. Pure creatine monohydrate remains the most studied, safest, and most reliable option. Simplicity here is a feature, not a limitation. Hydration must also be addressed. Because creatine draws water into cells, overall fluid needs increase slightly.
Inadequate hydration can lead to headaches or cramps, which are often blamed on creatine itself. These effects are not toxicity, but dehydration. Adequate water intake resolves them. One persistent myth concerns kidney health. Creatine increases blood creatinine levels, a marker used to assess kidney function. This increase reflects greater creatine turnover, not kidney damage. In healthy individuals, long-term studies show no adverse effects on renal function. Context matters when interpreting laboratory values. When implemented correctly, creatine does not act as a stimulant or a fat burner. It functions as a metabolic support tool. It reduces unnecessary energy expenditure in the liver, stabilizes cellular energy, supports brain function, preserves muscle, and allows the body to operate closer to its intended design. Fat loss follows not because the body is forced, but because internal constraints are removed. The system shifts from conservation to expression. This is the difference between struggling against biology and working with it. When energy is available at every level, the body no longer needs to protect fat. It can finally let it go.